a lot of my popularity. But still, the man of the street, I felt, as I told you, I feel it always, I felt that I have still the confidence of the man of the street. And then everything came on July 72 when I made my decisions to send out the Soviet experts.
Sadat's decision to expel the Russians was warmly received at home. Sadat hoped that when the Russians left, President Nixon would exert more pressure on Israel for withdrawal. One of his initiatives moved through unusual channels. The former child movie star, now diplomat Shirley Temple Black, was visiting Cairo. Sadat admired her and asked her to tea.
Well, near the end of our conversation, he said, I would like you to take a message from me to your president. And I said, I'll be delighted to. And he said, Shirley, please tell your president that I am the first Arab leader, the first leader in over 20 years to actively seek peace. And we want peace in this country. He was very forceful about this. He repeated it. And I said I would take the message back to the president.
Mrs. Black was unable to see President Nixon or any of his aides. Finally, she left the message with Nixon's secretary, Rosemary Woods. With no response, Sadat laid his plans for the October War. The world was surprised at Sadat's decisiveness. The Israelis were surprised, even though they had seen Sadat move boldly in the first 3 years of office.
You may say that every year since 71, Sadat has made one major political decision which was very bold, imaginative, and successful. In May 71, in one strike, he got rid of the top echelon of the Nasser's political structure. In July 72, he kicked out the Russians. In October 73, he launched an offensive against Israel, which at least managed to terminate the no peace, no war situation which had existed in Egypt, which had become unbearable, and gradually these type of decisions have changed his image in this country as well.
Sadat maintains that his diplomatic failures left him no choice but to fight.
It was aimed as a limited operation. The land was not my aim at all. I wanted only to prove to the whole world that the Israeli theory of security would collapse and we would cross the canal and we could capture the Bar-Lev line. These were my aims.
Sadat himself was close to the campaign. During much of the fighting, he remained in the operations room. This is the first film ever allowed there, during a later briefing on troop status.
I was in the operation room and I received the reports one by one. The strong points of the Bar-Lev line is surrendering and is captured. And after 4 hours exactly, about 6 o'clock, it was quite obvious that the Israelis has lost their balance. At that time, I told my people in the operation room, my forces, I told them, felicitations. The Israelis has lost their balance.
The war left Sadat as a world leader with whom other leaders had to contend. President Nixon came to call. Sadat was now critical to peace or war. Henry Kissinger trekked to his door. Sadat believes in Kissinger. The momentum for settlement in the Middle East has slowed, but Kissinger's stock remains high.
We have a very cordial relationship, and we have based it up to now on speaking very frankly with each other. He tries to explain to me what his concerns are. I try to explain what, in my judgment, is possible. And, of course, it is part of my job in these negotiations to explain the Israeli point of view.
The real question is, if he wants Israeli withdrawals, does he understand that there has to be a political price and that it cannot simply be a unilateral military action? In other words, can he stop thinking only of withdrawal and start thinking about peace? Not only about what he wants from Israel, but what Israel wants from him. That's the great test, because he's not going to get any withdrawal without peace or some progress towards peace.
Most people are afraid that, think that he means well, but that simply he will let Israel down, if you wish, or he will not be able to deliver the goods in case of negotiations. Not so much because he doesn't want it. He seems to wish for some kind of settlement, but because the ties between Egypt and Syria, or between Egypt and the Palestinians, whatever it means, between the obligations that Egypt feels towards the remnant of the Arab world.
Sadat is an implacable enemy of Israel. This is also the truth. He is no fool, but he's an enemy.
One result of the October War was that Henry Kissinger negotiated an Israeli withdrawal from a small portion of Sinai. A year after the war, we went to Sinai with Sadat. Mr. President, quite frankly, a great many people in the West look at the Sinai and they say, this is nothing but sand. Mm-hmm. Is there, in fact, no way in which a compromise can be achieved by which somewhere here in the Sinai, Israel can have the security it requires and you can have the honor you demand?
This is very important. This is not the correct logic, you see. If this is sand, well, the motherland, if it is sand, mud, or marshes, or whatever it is the motherland. I don't know if the ordinary American citizen can agree to the fact that anyone comes to some of the western desert, some of your deserts there, and grab by force a piece of this desert and then starts to impose his conditions. This is the situation here.
How can you convince the Israelis, who are 17 kilometers from you, granted sitting on your territory, that once you get Sinai back, you won't attack them?
How can you convince me on the other side that I shall not be attacked by them? This is the same thing.
During the 5 weeks we spent with Sadat, the issue of war and peace confronted him constantly, pursuing him even to his village. A representative of the Pope came to Cole. They discussed religious tolerance. A settlement in Jerusalem is important to other Arabs. Sadat would like the Pope to pressure the Israelis. Part of our stay was during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Like all good Muslims, Sadat fasted from sunup to sundown and often didn't begin work until late at night. Sometimes he works at the Abdeen Palace, built in splendor by King Farouk. He has few aides and rarely gives the impression of working hard. Critics believe the Egyptian bureaucracy rumbles on without a firm hand at the top. On another night, the American ambassador, Herman Isles, called on Sadat at home. The president often works here. He has the reputation of being a good listener and a persuasive talker. On any given night, the meetings reflected the effort for peace and the contingency for war. This night, first a group of businessmen who want to encourage tourists. Sadat gave the go-ahead for tourist centers. He hopes this will mean money in Egyptian pockets. The second meeting, preparation for fighting. The British Under-Secretary of Defense discussed an aircraft sale. It was not accidental that the third important man here was the personal representative of King Faisal. Saudi Arabia pays many of Egypt's bills. By the end of the evening, Sadat had purchased British helicopters. No matter how late his visitors ever left, he ended his evenings by sitting and watching a movie. Much of Sadat's time is devoted to ceremony. On this night, the swearing in of a new cabinet. There were no changes which marked a shift in policy. The business of fealty over, Sadat chaired a cabinet meeting. Sadat does not like detail and confines himself to broad directives. The issue here was galloping inflation and the need to reconstruct a staggering economy. Nowhere is reconstruction needed more than in the Suez Canal area. During our stay, we accompanied the president on what he called a reconstruction visit to the canal. Sadat does not travel to learn the hard facts. Those he can gather at home. The trip was intended to raise morale. It did.